Hi folks, this is Jason again for MrTheBigMan.net. I wanted to take you through the start of a track. I'll set the scene first of all so you understand where it came from. I recently went out to Spain and took my laptop and an Ozone keyboard from M Audio in order to basically go out, enjoy a bit of the sun, but also to write quite a lot for my next album, which I hope to have out for October next year. And one thing that I got really interested in upon seeing a video by Chris Randall of Audio Damage, he was doing essentially the same thing live with hardware sequencers and hardware synths. I wanted to try and see if I could recreate that in Reason and run it from my keyboard so that I could do essentially a live performance of a track. That track I've named an introduction, which will be the first track of the record, although not completely finished. You can get it now as a demo. I've already recorded the live track on Bandcamp. And essentially what I wanted to do was run you through exactly how I did it in order to set it up to be able to do live performance. Now, as you can see, it's made up of 2 redrums and 2 Thors. And the redrums themselves, I'm going to press play on them so you can hear some of them, some of the sounds. So you can hear a fairly rudimentary drum kit, but what I've done is I've created different variations using the pattern pads here. And you'll note that there's 8 on the redrum, so we can have 8 separate patterns and 8 separate types of drum beat. So I'll play them and switch between them so you can hear it. As you can hear, that's a fairly straightforward drum. It's really just a bass drum and a snare. But you can hear also I've added additional sounds into the second part, and we pop back on the pattern again, and we just get the actual sound itself. So I used the stock sounds from Reason for this because I didn't have anything else on my laptop apart from that. Obviously, I'll change that at a later date, but it was to give you an idea. Now, what I did do was I set the run or the sequencer start point on this via a key on the keyboard, so whenever I pressed it, it ran. So we'll do that now so that you can see it. So essentially, we're just going to go to edit remote override mapping, which essentially allows us to MIDI learn on this. So we'll bring that up. We can see here that it's set up for the M Audio Ozone. I'm going to take that out, put it in as other. Now that's for the keyboard, no override. I'm going to select learn from controller surface, and I'm going to press this key. And as you can see, it's picked up key C3 from me pressing it. I'm going to click OK. So whenever I press C3 now, we can see that the sequencer has started. I wanted to do the same thing for each of these patterns because I want to be able to change them on the fly. The reason why I chose C is because I've got 2 patterns, which gives me 2 black keys on C sharp and D sharp. So again, I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm selecting the pattern. I'm going to edit override. I'm learning and I'm pressing C sharp. So I click OK, and I do exactly the same thing for this pattern. And I use D sharp. Now I'll press play again. We can see it's on B, so I'm going to press C sharp. And we can see it's flipped back to 1. Press D sharp. And it's gone back in again to 2. So that was how I set that up. So that was to keep that so I could run it live, essentially to run any particular sound that I wanted to and any pattern that I wanted to. I did exactly the same thing with this redrum, except this redrum, it has a hi-hat on it. Okay, so there's only one variation on the hi-hat here. So what I did again was set it up next to black keys. So take this, edit the mapping, learn, and I've chosen F3 because I've got F sharp, G sharp, and A sharp just above it. Click OK. So if I press again, it runs. Now because there's nothing in the other patterns, there's no point having it set up, but we'll use that at a later date essentially, to be able to set up additional patterns if we need to. So now I'm going to move on to Thor. And the first thing I'll say about Thor is this. Whenever I first started using Reason, it was way back in the day, and I was a big preset junkie at that stage, and it really didn't like it, because I couldn't get the sounds out of it that I wanted. Now, I'd read all of these magazines that said it was a beast, and it did this, and it did that, and it did the other. I couldn't see it at that stage because I hadn't really gotten into the whole sound design thing yet. So what I did was I went through some of the presets on this and started to mess around with them. Now I'll do a full Exploration Thor series at some point to go through how it actually works. I just want to show you how I use the step sequencer and set up some of the buttons in the modulation matrix in order to be able to change and make different sounds, using the knobs that I had on the keyboard itself. So we can see here that we've got a full synth. I'll just click run. Now, I don't know if you can really hear that because it's quite a bassy sound, but you'll see that I've got the step sequencer set up here to trigger on these particular notes, and you'll see these little dials above it. Now if I hover over a dial, it'll tell me what note that's set to. Right now it's set to C2. If I change that, you'll see that the note changes. So this is how we begin to build melodies using the step sequencer. And I've done that for all of the different steps the whole way right through, in order to give me different sounds. So when I click on run, it gives me different sounds and different ways to play with things. Then what I did was I just went through the synth, changed some of the sounds. I changed it to a sound. Initially it was a saw. I'll change it and let you hear it. And so as you can hear, when we went up to the sawtooth, you really got to hear this form and filter working. Now, this is one of the biggest filters that you can use if you're making dubstep sounds. Really what I was going for was that 303 sound, really, across both synths, in order to be able to give me that kind of live feeling and playing it live. But the formant filter is absolutely superb, and we can make changes to it and it'll give us different sounds. So you can see that this oscillator is linked into not only this low pass ladder filter, but it's also number one's going in through the formant filter, and that's giving us that sound, and then it's being passed on into the amp envelope from here. Then lastly being run through a low pass filter again, and we've also got chorus and delay linked on this. Which is what's giving us the background sound essentially from there. Now what I did to set that up was, we obviously have the run button, but as you'll see up here we also have macro control. So we've got two different knobs and we've got two different buttons, and we can use those knobs and buttons essentially to control parameters within this actual synth itself. And you'll see down at the bottom in the matrix we've got button 1 is linked to the trigger of the sequencer. So whenever I press this button, which is mark start sequencer, sequencer starts. How we do that essentially is you choose it from here. So you're choosing modifiers, going to button 1, we're then using step sequencer, trigger, and then this variability, we want to put that up to full so that when we do press that button, it automatically triggers the actual sound itself. Now again, I did exactly the same thing. The only difference this time was that I used the knobs on the actual Ozone keyboard to be able to control, in this case, the frequency knob or the cutoff, and the resonance, and then also I had one set up for the drive of the formant filter. How I did that essentially is as simple as this. Exactly the same thing as we did before, except this time on the Alesis, I'm going to use the data entry slider just to give you an idea and show you how this works so that you can hear it for yourself. Click OK, and then I will start the sequencer again. And as you can hear, as I move this up, so that was how I set that up. Now that gave me 3 controls on this particular synth to be able to manipulate in real time and actually play live with, which is really, really good because these are preset patterns and that they're the same pattern over and over again, so we need to introduce some movement within those patterns in order for our brain to not shut off and not be interested in the actual track itself. So again, what I did was this button here, I set that up on D3, click OK, so I can press both now. And that gives you the general idea. So lastly, not going into too heavily, the other Thor at the bottom was just creating a different sound. You'll see I've stacked 2 oscillators. This time I'm just running them through a low pass filter. If I press on run, and that's essentially my bass sound for the overall track itself. So I set it up in exactly the same way. So we've got the rotary set up at the top, but really what I was interested in was setting up the run to another key, which in this case is E3, and clicking OK. I had the frequency and the resonance set up to knobs in order to be able to control them. And then what I did was practice it for a bit to see what worked and what didn't work. And this was something that I picked up way back in the Ableton days, whereby in the session view you could set up varying variations of loops and then trigger scenes of loops all in a row so that you could see what actually worked going into what, so which part of the song worked when you put it in after another part of the song, and so on and so forth. So this allowed me the opportunity then to stand and practice in my hotel room to see that I could get some decent sounds out of it and get some decent play out of it. Now what I did when I got home was essentially run the mobile studio, the outputs of the Ozone directly into my Sapphire 6 USB and record it into Ableton Live. I then took that recording, mastered it in Logic, and then uploaded it onto Bandcamp. So if you go onto Bandcamp, you will see a section called Demos. You'll see an introduction, and if you press play, that was a live performance that I did when I come back from holidays. Now obviously this is the first part of the tutorial. I'm going to go through it as I create the tracks, so this may not be up for a month or so yet whilst I'm still messing around with it, but I hope that gave you an idea of how I went about creating a live performance of a track within reason, and then we'll take that track from there and create something even better out of it. Thanks a lot.